Hi there. So I think we'll just give it another minute before we get started on our webinar and let all of our attendees join. We've got quite a few on hold, so we'll just let everyone get in. Right, I think that is quite a few people now managed to get into the event, which is great. So what we'll do is we'll get started. I'll do a bit of an intro and explain the running order of today, and hopefully by the time I finish that and we could get started with our first speaker, most of our attendees will be safely into the session. So first of all, welcome. Welcome to our first event in a series of events focused on opportunities in the low carbon sector. This event is run in partnership between Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc and Scottish Enterprise. And this first one, titled Low Carbon Opportunities to Generate Business Growth, will focus on some of the opportunities that our speakers have identified within the low carbon space. So they'll each share their story in turn, and I won't spoil any of that and what's to come. So first of all, I'm Jill Simpson. I lead on marketing and communications at MSIP, and I will be facilitating today's event. We've got an interesting panel lined up. So if Katie clicks to the next slide, there we go. So we've got 5 speakers today, quite a busy running order, and we'll just get through each of those in turn. So the first of which, Greig Coull, the CEO of Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc. We've got Faisal Ghani, the CEO and founder of SolarisKit. Stewart Morrison, the Managing Director of Mep Technologies Limited. Charlotte Stamper, the Energy Sector Manager at Zero Waste Scotland, and Vaso Makri, the Manager at Circular Tayside. So thank you to all of our panellists for agreeing to join us today and speak. And thank you to our audience as well for joining, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of today's session. So some housekeeping for today. We've got each speaker, I've explained, will speak in turn in that order, and we will take all questions at the end. So there's a few different ways that you can ask questions. First of all, you can type your question in the question box, and you can't see that box, but I can, and I will pick those questions up and I will direct those to our panel. The second option, you can raise your hand, so there is a raised hand icon, and I will keep an eye out for that, and anyone that does, I will invite you to ask your question and to take you off mute. A slight warning with that option, it does take a couple of seconds for the unmute to take effect, so just bear that in mind before you ask your question. And finally, there is that other option, the chat bar is there, and we would invite you and welcome you to share your thoughts and comments as each speaker shares their presentation. So, and another warning as well, today's session is recorded. We will share this recording after the event on our social media for those who could not attend today. So please do be aware of that, particularly if you intend to ask your question directly, and just to be aware that it will be recorded. Okay, so we'll get started today. Katie, if you could, I think that's all my slides it is. Excellent. So that brings us to our first speaker. So our first speaker is Greig Coull. Greig is the CEO of MSIP. Prior to starting his position last year as CEO, Greig spent 35 years working for Michelin in various different roles, covering manufacturing, marketing, and laterally with Michelin Motorsport. So Greig spent a lot of time in France, and one of the questions, particularly today when it's heavy snow outside in Scotland, what made Greig come back to Scotland? What was that pull? And Greig is going to now share his presentation and give you some more insight into that. So over to you, Greig.
That's great, thank you. Can everyone see can you see my screen, Jill? Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, then I'll get started, and I'll also set a timer so that I don't run over too much. So why am I back? Well, for three reasons. The first is that I really wanted to work in this exciting and dynamic sector and feel it was making a contribution. Secondly, I felt that I had the skills and learnings that could be brought to bear in this job. And thirdly, to be frank, I wanted to give something back to Dundee and the Tayside region for all that they've given me. So that's why I'm here, despite the snow. So a little introduction to the Michelin Innovation Parc. But first of all, perhaps let's have a look at climate tech funding. This is drawn from a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which suggests that the sector is growing 3 times faster than artificial intelligence, and that was the investment boom area of the last decade. So there is significant investment interest in this. All the traditional sources are involved: venture capitalism, governments, and also corporate, each of them with their own motivations, particularly governmental to stimulate and seed growth, and also to meet their very stringent net zero commitments. Scotland's committed to being net zero by 2045, and the investment is intended to make that possible. And if you look on the right-hand side of my screen, here are the sectors in which climate tech is being funded, particularly mobility and transport, but also other areas such as food, agriculture and land, and most recently climate carbon capture and storage. To work in this space, business needs to really be ready, and to be successful, we feel, particularly in the low carbon economy, businesses need to develop their technology readiness levels and their market readiness levels to a degree which allows them to open themselves to the market. Secondly, find a home. Where are they going to be based? Build a business plan which determines how they're going to approach that market. Get funding. Networking is something that is of particular interest. Many people are working in this space now, and collectively are stronger than trying to do things individually. Training is something that we've identified as a particular need as well, to make sure that the staff have the skills necessary to maintain, to build, and to facilitate production. Produce economically, but also cleanly and equitably, and that's particularly important if people and companies are looking for funding, and specifically government-backed funding. There is a strong element of being net zero compliant, and also to work equitably. And last but not least, whatever you're doing, how are you going to bring it to market and distribute? This is the Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc, as you see before you, and actually we're a result of this funding. What happened a couple of years ago is that Michelin unfortunately had to withdraw from production in Scotland, but rather than let the site be split up and sold off, between Michelin, Scottish Enterprise and Dundee City Council, Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc was born, with a mission to build this creative home for innovators, for manufacturers, and for skilled leaders to be able to collaborate and also grow, but specifically in the sustainable mobility and decarbonisation sector. It was tempting at the time to open up the mission to whatever business could present itself quickly. However, all three partners in this adventure said it's going to be sustainable mobility and decarbonisation, and we've stuck fairly rigidly to that, albeit very wide segment. So if you see the graph on the left-hand side, which is the one I presented earlier, actually currently we're in discussion with companies in the energy sector, heating and cold storage batteries, load balancing, duty cycle analysis, but also right the way through the whole gamut of mobility and transport, electric vehicles, battery technology, hydrogen fuel cell technology, right the way through to heavy industry and heavy plant motorization. There's an awful lot of activity on light vehicles at the moment, but little by little, there's a growing need, if we're going to meet our 2045 targets, to work in the heavier space, and particularly on HGVs. Also, we're working in the built environment space. And last but not least, some tenants who may join us who work on carbon capture and storage. Our ambition is clearly to recreate the jobs which went when the Michelin plant closed. So we have a target of 850 jobs over the next few years, but also to make an economic impact in the region and in Scotland, and particularly to contribute in a meaningful way to the environmental question. We offer an excellent infrastructure. One of the things that's particularly appropriate here is that we have already all the buildings which are being currently repurposed to host our tenants. So we don't need to build from zero. But also I'll try to show we're going to have an advanced skills academy to address the question that many young companies and many transforming companies have about their workforce. Expertise in terms of innovation, also sustainable energy and support packages to help these companies grow and flourish. If you look at the site from this perspective, first of all, we have about 75,000 square meters of fully appointed manufacturing units. So those are built and ready to be occupied. Occupied in terms of EV battery manufacturing, perhaps even manufacturing electrical vehicles, producing hydrogen, building, servicing and maintaining hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and also, why not, wind turbine componentry. Scotland is at the cutting edge at the moment of wind turbine construction and deployment, and we will facilitate that through our activities. Secondly, and perhaps one of the most important things about everything we're doing, is to build an advanced skills academy with the help of Dundee and Angus College. In this skills academy, we will do basic apprenticeships, yes, but we will also be able to take employees and students right the way through training on hydrogen production, on fuel cells, on hybrid car maintenance, on flow battery construction and maintenance. So there'll be around about, we hope, ultimately about 250 students a year who will pass through our doors and gain the skills necessary to accompany not only our future tenants, but also to benefit Scotland in a wider sense. Secondly, we're going to be building an innovation hub, and this is going to be perhaps, you might call it the biggest coffee machine in Tayside, where everyone can meet, discuss, ideate, generate ideas, and even transform those ideas into something physical in the purpose-built labs that we're creating. Thirdly, we have energy supplied from local sources, but at competitive rates. We have green energy already on site via the 2 wind turbines, and soon we will have a whole solar array on some of the bigger buildings that you see to the bottom left of my screen. But also we have a close partnership with the MEB waste to energy plant next door, which supplies us with steam for heating and for production purposes, and also crucially behind the wire license exempt electricity. So there should be savings of at least 10% in terms of any electric bills for our tenants. In terms of our roadmap, where are we? Well, we've created the team. We're currently decommissioning and demolishing some of the buildings which are no longer appropriate for the use that we want to put them to. And construction has started, and repurposing of some of the workshops, particularly the Skills Academy. We have quite a considerable tenant pipeline that we're working through the levels of maturity to finally signing with them. And we already are delighted to have 3 companies who are physically on site, 2 of which you'll hear from today. And last but not least, we're going to try and create a campus which will coexist alongside the industrial part of our park, in which we'll be able to encourage free movement, exchange, and also be attractive to students who are in this space. And last but not least, I would leave you with this little diagram, which shows that, yes, like everywhere else, we can provide competitive rates for square meters and heating and lighting, and particularly low electricity rates. But not only that, we layer on top of that 3 stakeholders who are very aligned and very supportive in terms of what we're wanting to do, including Michelin, which is, I think, the 14th most trusted brand in the world, and that lends a lot of credibility and reach to what we're doing. Skills training, as I mentioned, right the way through from apprenticeships to advanced engineering and degree level qualifications. The brand equity that we're building and a considerable network of contacts which we can leverage. Helping companies from R&D through incubators and accelerators, right the way through the TRL and MRL levels to investment and production and market conquest. And also time and route to market. Our infrastructure is ready, and we can even potentially help companies train their staff before they arrive on site. So all in all, a lot of additional benefits which give us the differentiation value and which are fairly crucial when a company wants to build a business in this space. So thank you for that. I think I've more or less respected the time, and you can follow us through all the usual social medias, but I'll be free to answer questions as we go through. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. That was perfect, and you are bang on time. So you've set a trend. Hopefully, hopefully everyone else follows.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No, that was great, and a brilliant way to kickstart things. I think sets quite a nice tone for today's session. It also gives a really good background on MSIP, which I'm not biased, but I do have first-hand experience. And it is a significant opportunity in Scotland and something I'm very privileged to be a part of. So thank you, Greg. Our next speaker, and I see there's been a very smooth handover of presentation rights there, so that worked well, that was good. Our next speaker is Faisal Ghani, the CEO and founder of SolarisKit. So Faisal is an engineer, and he moved to Scotland in 2015 to do his postdoctoral research at Heriot-Watt University. Since then, in Faisal's own words, he married a Scottish lass, set up some roots in Scotland, and launched a very successful startup business called SolarisKit. So Faisal is going to tell you all about this now. So over to you, Faisal.
Perfect, great. Thanks very much, Jill. So I assume the slides are coming through okay with the seamless
transition. I can't see your camera. I don't know if you've turned your camera back on or not.
Oh, right. Yep, sorry.
That's great. Okay.
There
you go. I can see it. Right, I'll turn mine off and I'll shut up now. Over to you.
Great. Except now I can't see my slides for some reason. Oh, sorry. I'm not seeing my slides now. Sorry, I'm just going to turn it off. This is working for me at the moment. Sorry about that. So good morning, everyone. I'm Faisal. As Jill mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of SolarisKit, a pending B Corp company that's based at the Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc. We're focused on bringing affordable solar heating solutions to the world, particularly in the global south. So as you're all aware, oh, sorry, that's not working. Oh, there we are. So as you're all aware, there's an enormous transition that's currently taking place in the world as we shift our current dependence on fossil fuels to modern, cleaner sources of energy like renewables. Of course, this effort is taking place to reduce carbon and other greenhouse gas emissions to minimize the impact of climate change. Something that comes as a surprise to many people, however, is the fact that carbon emissions from the developing economies far exceed those produced from the industrialized nations. This is less surprising when you consider it's where the vast majority of the global population reside. It's also where the vast amount of population growth and economic development is occurring. The traditional paradigm is that with increased economic activity comes increased carbon emissions, and this is obviously something that we need to break away from. Something that is also often overlooked is the importance of heating and its impact on the environment. Globally speaking, around 50% of energy is currently consumed to meet heating demand, and this is still on average met using fossil fuels. This is particularly true in the United Kingdom, where we are still largely dependent on natural gas to meet our heating demand. So what this told me is that if we want to truly tackle the climate emergency, it's important that we develop affordable and practical clean energy solutions that can be implemented at a global scale in both developed and developing economies. If we do that, we'll not only impact the environment, but change people's lives. So in Kigali, Rwanda, for example, many households report spending up to 40% of their income paying their energy bill, 7% of which just goes into heating water. When I read this, it was a real turning point in my life. Before I get into that though, it would help to give you a little bit of background on myself to provide a little bit of context. So in addition to the introduction that Jill gave, I would sum up myself as a nerd who knew from the age of 12 that I really wanted to be a mechanical engineer. So I developed a particular interest in heat transfer, thermodynamics, which then led to a strong personal interest in solar energy. So I still find it really quite amazing that my job is to harness the energy from a star that's 150 million kilometers away. So I spent the last 15 years working in the solar energy field in both industry and academia, never really considering enterprise and entrepreneurship as an option. This changed rather counterintuitively when I became a dad. But while I knew climate change was going to impact my life in some way, I knew it was going to make a deep impact on my daughter's life. I then started questioning the impact I was going to make tackling this problem and realized I could do much more through enterprise. So going back to the situation in Rwanda and Africa as a whole, and the low penetration of solar heating technology, despite the abundance of solar energy available in these parts of the world, I realized that current solar collectors, like the one shown here, have been primarily developed for the needs of wealthy and industrialized regions like Europe. While these collectors are high-performing, they're expensive, difficult to transport, and complicated to install, all of which are barriers preventing their wide-scale adoption at a time when they're urgently needed. In response to these barriers, I designed a new prismatic-shaped solar thermal collector, which is able to convert sunlight directly into hot water at temperatures up to 50 degrees Celsius. What makes our solar collector quite unique is that it's the world's first flat packable solar thermal collector. So like an IKEA product, you can quickly and easily assemble our collector in approximately 20 minutes without any tooling. Because of its flat packable design, our product is cheaper to buy, it's easier to transport, and it's been designed to be as easy to install as possible, making it ideal for regions like Africa and Asia. The SolarisKit journey really started about 2 years ago, so we're quite young. Because of my engineering background, the technical aspects of the business was less challenging, but the enterprise development and the commercialization aspects were a significant challenge to me. Fortunately, there's an incredible ecosystem to support you in Scotland, which I've greatly benefited from, which includes going through the Converge Challenge in 2019, which has just gone live for this year, the Climate Accelerator Program at the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation, the Enterprise Fellowship from the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and the excellent MSIP Accelerator Program, which I'm currently part of at the moment. Participating in these programs has really helped bridge the gaps to turn my idea into a functioning business. Like any business starting out, funding has been a constant source of stress and challenge for me. Particularly in my case, as many investors don't really want to do much with a company focused on developing economies. We have, however, been very fortunate to receive financial support from agencies like Innovate UK, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Edge, and the EIT Climate Kick program funded by the EU. There is terrific support out there in the low carbon space, as Greg mentioned previously. I certainly recommend getting in touch with Scottish Enterprise to find out more, as this is very much a changing landscape. The funding that we've raised so far has currently gone into focusing on the starting of our production line at the fantastic MSIP site. The MSIP site has provided the ideal location for SolarisKit, providing a space to manufacture, carry out R&D, and business-related activities. This is really an exciting phase for SolarisKit, which is progressing well with our production tooling now complete and assembly line now nearing completion. I expect the line to be fully up and running by the end of the month, with first units being manufactured early March. Looking ahead, we'll be focusing on manufacturing and building the team, and this will be a strong focus at the start. As we'll be completing, and we'll also be working on completing our pilot installations in Rwanda and Scotland, which is a very exciting phase for us. While our journey sounds quite rosy until now, I would personally say that starting a business in this space has been incredibly challenging, demanding, and stressful. During the difficult times, which unfortunately happens quite regularly, I try to remind myself of the reasons why I started this venture and the impact it could make if I could see it all the way through. SolarisKit has set the target of funding the plantation of over 1 million trees and the installation of approximately 50,000 collectors by the year 2024, which will impact the environment while improving energy access to thousands of people worldwide. And this is a really good reason for me to get out of bed. On that note, I'd like to say thank you and look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Faisal. That was brilliant. Really interesting, and it's the first time I've heard your presentation firsthand. Obviously, I've heard a lot about SolarisKit, but it's really, really impactful when you hear it all together. What a journey you've been on, and hopefully a really exciting future as well at MSIP,
Yes,
of course.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So up next, we have Stewart Morrison, the Managing Director of Mep Technologies Limited. Now, Stuart is what I would call a well-kent face in our webinar series. We've had Stuart involved in several now for very, very good reasons. Stuart has over 29 years experience in the electronics and automotive industry, and Mep Technologies Limited was MSIP's first tenant. So we're really excited to welcome you back to one of our webinars, Stuart, and over to you to share your business story.
Yep, thanks very much. And thanks for the good introduction. It's been great to finally get moved over to Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc. We were keen to get here for a long time because we know that the being on the site with all the plans of moving in lots of low carbon technologies and innovation hubs and skills centres, all the good things that Greig talked about earlier, were going to be of great benefit to us, and hopefully our company offers an opportunity for people to collaborate with our type of technology that supports all the low carbon industries, or at least most of them. Anyway, so as Jill introduced, I'm the Managing Director of Mep Technologies. Although we're only 5 years old as a company, we've been working with rechargeable battery packs as a team for many years, some of the team members over 3 decades worth. And the batteries are used in a variety of industries, automotive, e-mobility, and industrial battery pack applications are the industries we're most involved in, but we've also done some work in energy storage. And I'll come on to, later in the presentation, I'll come on to some of our applications that we've been working on. But it probably doesn't take an awful lot of imagination to understand the benefits the batteries can bring to low carbon technologies. In the past, so to our accolade, maybe there's probably other words that other people would use, we were part of the team at Axiom Technologies who developed and manufactured the battery pack that went in the McLaren P1 hypercar. That was certainly an industry first, a world first, and all of it was designed and manufactured from Dundee. So really pleased to be able to say that. More recently, we've been working on battery packs for portable storage applications. Again, I'll come on to them later. And we've also still been working, with our experience, working on full electric commercial vehicles and other e-mobility applications. So I'll give you a view of some of the technologies that we use along the way. And all of these are very important to battery performance. I guess you'd call it know-how, some of it's intellectual property. But very important is joining technologies. So being able to take individual cells, turn them into a battery pack, and make sure that the electrical connections are as low resistance as possible. If you don't, you end up with overheating, losses in power, and none of those are particularly good. So we work with technologies such as composite bus bars, where we mix metals, and laser welding in some cases. We've been working with laser welding now for over 10 years, but for some that's quite a novel technology. To support the batteries, we also need to be knowledgeable on how to cool them as they get hot, and also to maintain their temperature in hot and cold environments. And for this, we work with different types of cooling system technologies. So passive heat sinking, where the cells are in contact with a cold surface or a hot surface to change their temperature. Active heat sinking, so forcing air through the cell block and taking the heat out through a heat exchanging radiator of sorts, or in some cases liquid cooling, and that falls into two flavors: cold plates, where we can take the heat away, draw the heat away through an aluminium plate that has liquid cooling within it, or in some cases we've now been working on immersion cooling, where we immerse the whole battery pack into a dielectric fluid, and as such that has added benefits of being able to make the battery a little safer when things maybe go wrong. Although that's it's still in its infancy, and we are working with several different compounds on that one. To support batteries, certainly for electric vehicles, it's obvious we need to work with keeping the battery as light as possible. And for that, we work with technologies like aluminium composites, where we have aluminium sandwiched with other materials. Other composites, one we've worked on, experimented with, is a composite called Nomex, which is almost a fiber paper, and carbon fiber composites. Again, we've had experience of working on carbon fiber composites for almost 10 years. Now, what is a cell? So cells come in different guises and different chemistries, and each one is uniquely applicable to different applications. And this is part of the venture we go on when we have an application to work on with a customer. We need to choose the right cell for the application, and that can be from one of three different formats. Pouch cells, which are a pouch. If anybody's opened a mobile phone, they may probably have come across a pouch cell. These are cells that are made from a foil pouch. Prismatics, which are usually rectangular shaped, and probably more traditionally known, cylindrical cells. There are different sizes of cylindrical cells, but they are very, very similar to the AA batteries in most cases that most people know. And those cells can be made of different chemistries. We list there some chemistries. Phosphate, nanophosphate, both have been used extensively in the automotive industry until more recently. The newer technology that's taking over in the automotive industry is nickel cobalt manganese, or NCM. And for heavier applications, lithium titanate proves to be a very, very heavy cell chemistry. So you end up with a very heavy battery pack, but it has many, many cycles of life compared with the other chemistries that I've already mentioned, and can also cope with very, very high power rates. So these tend to be used more traditionally in ferries, electric vehicles, train applications. And what is starting to be used more often, and we are working on a battery pack composed of this at the moment, is a technology known as supercapacitors. So, as the name suggests, these are very similar to capacitors, but they exhibit high charge rates and high discharge rates, and very, very low internal resistances. So it's again another developing technology that we're working with at the moment. And in conjunction with another company whose name's been associated with Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc, Ampty Power have been developing sodium cells. If I dwell a little on sodium for a moment, sodium, obviously compared with lithium, is an element more abundant on Earth, and as it's less rare earth metal, it proves to be a really good option for developing in the battery industry. Not only is there more of it, but because it's more abundant, it can prove to be a much cheaper cell. So we worked with Ampty Power to develop one of the first automotive grade battery packs, I would say in the world, to our knowledge, but definitely in the UK. And we've got a lot of high hopes for sodium. It also proves to be a very safe chemistry because it's less likely to have such a high heat content of fire if anything does happen to go wrong, such as crashes, accidents, or the like. To support all of that, a battery needs to have some control, and our expertise, along with knowing chemistries and how cells are put together, is battery management systems. We have our own battery management system, and at the moment our battery management system is being developed to support a novel hybrid battery architecture where we can combine different chemistries to create a hybrid battery that can, for example, give high power and high energy all in the same package. Thanks to Innovate UK, we are being funded to work on that technology with a few collaborating partners. We are very pleased to be able to work with supercapacitors that are also manufactured in Scotland, and with a company down in England who are developing a novel off-road vehicle. This is more of a summary slide. So our high power connectivity using lasers and mixed metal composites, our pulse store battery technology with the intellectual property we have on mixing different chemistries, and all of our improved cooling methods summarizes our technologies and our expertise in developing battery systems for many different applications. Now, probably more interesting is some of the projects that we've actually worked on so far. Some people may have seen one of these. The company was based in Coventry, and they went out of business in 2012. However, there are still pockets of fleets of these vehicles around Europe. We support companies in Italy and in Paris, and also somewhere along the south coast of England. This was a 1.4 ton battery pack that was originally manufactured by our previous company, Mep Technologies Johnson Matthey Battery Systems, and that was a 54 kilowatt hour battery pack that was offered into a 7.5 ton GVW electric vehicle. These vehicles were used for Tesco type delivery applications. So they had a 60 mile range and a return to base charge overnight type duty. We recently developed a new battery management system to support those due to obsolescence. This was quite a challenging but very interesting project. We designed a T-shaped battery pack that was fitted into a classic Mini. And as you can see in the figures there, it may not, I'll try and put it in context. The Teslas on the road have approximately 160 watt-hours per kilogram in 2018, and our battery was 176 watt-hours per kilogram. So we were working on the leading edge of lightweighting and high energy density cells at the time. And based on 2019 figures, those cells improved again to give us an equivalent 194 watt-hours per kilogram of energy density. So it may not mean much to people outside of the industry, but these are quite high figures at battery level that we're very pleased about. We've also been working more recently on battery packs for e-motorcycles. We've actually got a couple of these vehicles here at the Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc, and you can see from some of the figures there, these are not designed to be super bikes. They're really good lightweight urban vehicles with a reasonable amount of distance in them that we expect will be a growing application around the UK. Another very interesting application, again, this time's energy storage. We worked with another company to develop a battery pack that was designed to be a part of a system that captured tidal storage. So at depths of up to 100 meters, this battery pack was designed to take very, very small amounts of current and store it. And the challenges for us were low current drain from the control system, and also keeping the cells in balance so that the battery pack was able to deliver as much capacity as it possibly could over long periods of time. And as we we're into manufacturing of battery packs. This is one of our larger sort of production runs at the moment. This is a very lightweight sort of half suitcase sized battery pack that's used by the emergency services industry to support equipment that supports the clearing of smoke from buildings in fires. And the key points for this one is it's low cost, it's high power, and it's got reasonable energy density with the power. And it has no, it's purely passively cooled. So again, the right choice of cell for this one was very important early on. And as I mentioned earlier, the sodium-ion pack was something we developed with and for AMP Power, and it was designed for automotive applications. We've got high hopes as AMP work on sodium technology that this can develop into something that the automotive industry will pick up more readily going forward. Happy to answer questions later on, but thanks very much to everybody for your time and listening. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. Hopefully you got something out of it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Stuart. Thank you. I always think whenever I watch one of your presentations that you make the very complex technology very understandable. And my other thought from today's is that we should get some of those motorbikes for MSIP just to get about the site.
Yeah.
So I'll maybe speak to Greg about that later.
Okay, thanks.
But definitely no e-scooters. I had an unfortunate incident with an e-scooter once, and yeah, I don't think I'll be going on one of them anytime soon. So,
Okay.
but thank you very much, Stuart. Appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for you at the panel session. So that brings us to our fourth speaker today, Charlotte Stamper. So Charlotte is the Energy Sector Manager at Zero Waste Scotland. Charlotte's role is focused on helping businesses in the energy industry transition to a circular economy. As well as her role at Zero Waste Scotland, Charlotte is a chartered waste manager and has a great understanding of circular considerations in the development of low CO2 technology, some of which she will share with you now. So over to you, Charlotte.
Morning, Jill. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, I can. I can see them.
Perfect. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to put my camera off because I'm trying to be very clever with my two screens and I think it might all unravel. So hopefully you can still see my slides. Just wanted to say thanks, first of all, to the organisers for having me today. I think what's going on at the park is absolutely fantastic example of the, as Faisal said, the sort of ecosystem that we're developing in Scotland. And what I'm going to talk about today is really giving the wider context as to why that's important for not only the low carbon transition, but also the importance of building a robust Scottish and UK supply chain in that transition, and why exactly tenants, just like Faisal and Stuart, are going to be such an integral part of the renewables and low carbon revolution here. So just briefly, a little bit about Zero Waste Scotland. So we are funded by Scottish Government, but we're not part of Scottish Government, and we exist to lead Scotland to use products and resources responsibly. And what that means is that instead of focusing on direct emissions, so things like the exhaust fumes that come out of your car, we actually focus on the carbon that's embodied in the products and materials that we use every day. 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint is actually contained in products and materials and services, and not things like the heating and electricity, the direct emissions. So it's an incredibly important part of our efforts to reduce emissions and their impact on climate change. So just a little bit of a background on where we are in Scotland as regards low carbon and renewables. So Scotland has world-leading climate change targets, which include supplying 50% of the energy for its heat, transport and electricity from renewable sources by 2030, which is only 9 years away, which is a little, that's accelerating towards us extremely quickly. So where are we on meeting those targets? This graph shows electricity generated, so total generated, not capacity, from renewable sources in Scotland from the year 2000 to 2019. And you can see there's been a healthy growth in the amount generated. Majority of that growth has come from onshore wind in the purple. Hydro has been pretty constant throughout, but you'll notice in the latter years, the dark green bar, that's offshore wind, just starting to creep in. And we're really at the start of the offshore wind explosion. And so that number will continue to increase. So that's fantastic. And in fact, over 90% of Scotland's primary electricity demand now comes from renewable sources. However, that's not the whole story, because we need our whole energy system to be powered by low carbon and renewable sources. And so this pie chart is showing total final energy consumption by sector in Scotland in the year 2019. And this is also was mirroring what Faisal said in his presentation. You'll see that actually 50% of the demand for energy in Scotland is for heating, and about a quarter is for transport. So although we're doing really well at decarbonising the electricity system, we need to make significant progress in both heat and transport in order to meet those climate change targets. To do this, we're going to need to build and resource an awful lot of things. The energy transition, it has to be vast and it has to be rapid. And this is going to require a massive materials transformation. So first of all, we're going to need to build an awful lot of new energy infrastructure, things like offshore wind, battery storage, solar, onshore wind. This is going to require the deployment of millions of tons of metals, concrete and composites. And concurrently to this, we need to move away from the fossil fuel assets and also start replacing the very oldest renewables assets. So the first wind farms to be commissioned onshore in Scotland are now 25 years old, and we need to replace them. So this is going to require something to happen with a lot of materials at the same time as we need to build a lot of things. And most of the focus on the renewables revolution has been on, and quite rightly, actually generating the clean electricity and the power that we need. But we also need to think about how this is resourced. And I like this quote. This is from a World Bank study in 2018, but it's still true now. And they concluded that the vast majority of future scenarios looking at climate and carbon have paid very little attention to the implications for the materials necessary to feed this future. So we haven't done a very good job of thinking about where these materials are going to come from, how much of them we're going to need, and what effect on the carbon balance we actually are going to have through using these materials. So what we're really saying is we need to start thinking about how we're actually going to resource all of these renewables in the future. And I think this last year has really hammered home the importance of having a resilient supply chain as well, not only a low carbon supply chain for renewables, but our energy system and supply chain, they have to be resilient. So apologies, this is an extremely depressing slide, I think, but it kind of hammers home the point that I'm making. So the top left-hand corner, you know, empty shelves, that's very short supply chains, short notice supply chains, just in time. Supermarkets, they can be disrupted very quickly. We've got lorries queuing on the M20 in Kent, border disruption. The picture that on the bottom left is a fuel crisis that happened in the UK a few years ago now, but again, you know, that's the reliance on one type of particular technology. And then of course probably the prevalence of extreme weather events, we know these are going to become more frequent due to climate change. So all of these things we need to guard and protect against the global and local shocks that are going to occur in the future. So within this, there are some specific problems we all need to consider when we're thinking about how we're going to address these, you know, the push to renewables. And they kind of fall in, for me, they fall into three categories. So the first one, carbon emissions. At the moment, we have very high carbon impact of both imported and exported raw materials, and steel is the overwhelmingly most predominant material used in deploying renewables infrastructure. In the UK at the moment, we import virgin steel from high carbon economies. The steel jackets for this, the offshore wind farms, for example, are being manufactured in China and the UAE. So they have a high carbon impact globally. And similarly, the decommissioned steel that's coming from offshore oil rigs coming back to Scotland, all of the steel from that is actually exported for recycling, usually in Turkey or India or Pakistan, in blast furnaces. Again, there's a very high carbon impact to those activities that we're embedding into the renewables transition. The second point is the resilience. So there's a global demand for critical materials. These new technologies, they all need different things, whether that's rare earth elements or different types of metals or high performing plastics or composites. There's going to be a global demand for these new technologies. And secondly, more locally, we have, particularly in Scotland, local economies that are reliant on older fossil fuel dominated industries like oil and gas exploration. So there's a local economic picture to be taken into account as well. And finally, the economic costs. So looking to the future, trade tariffs, carbon pricing. Again, are we baking in problems for the future when we're thinking about our dependence on things like steel and other raw materials for new infrastructure as the UK? And also, if we outsource everything, there'll be limited local economic benefits as the infrastructure and the economic benefit from that is focused overseas. So let's see if we can take a more local and circular approach to this to turn these into opportunities. And that's what we're trying to do at Zero Waste Scotland. So taking the first line, with steel, instead of exporting to blast furnaces overseas, we actually see there's an opportunity for recycling the steel in something called an electric arc furnace. If you power that using renewable electricity, something we have an abundance of in Scotland, you can achieve 90% carbon savings. And also, we've shown that working with asset operators, if you think about the end of life of your renewables asset or your technology, you can reduce the embodied carbon of that technology by 50% just by having a plan for what happens to it at the end of life, instead of just making it with no particular plan as to what you do with the materials inherent in that at the end of its life. The second thing, well, closed loop manufacturing gives you greater security of supply, and it also gives you better cost control of critical materials. So again, when something reaches the end of its life, having a plan for putting it back into the supply chain rather than just sending it for disposal. And for local economies, we know that every gigawatt of new renewables deployment creates 1,500 jobs. And if you apply circular economy approach to that, keeping local supply chains, then that's actually a direct multiplier on that jobs. So we need to help people transition away from fossil fuel jobs to renewables jobs. And the way we can do that is by taking this circular approach. And finally, economic. Well, we know the circular economy generates value because it values waste as a resource. And an example of that is that the oil and gas decommissioning market is actually worth £8 billion more to Scotland if the domestic market can provide services rather than exporting everything as we do at the moment with the vast majority of the materials that come back on shore from that activity. So I just wanted to finally touch on a couple of areas where there's huge opportunities for Scotland to build a circular, local, resilient supply chain. And I know that this work is fantastic work is already happening at the Michelin Parc. And this is where we're going to be focusing our support in the future. So we have grand ambitions, but we now must match these with actions. So the first one, the UK government has confirmed that the sale of new petrol and diesel cars will end by 2030. And this graph here has been produced by the Faraday Institution, and they've forecasted what that's going to mean for the demand for battery production, and they've translated this into the number of gigafactories, so gigafactory being somewhere where they make batteries on a large scale. And they've said by 2040, there'll be enough demand in the UK to sustain 8 gigafactories, and this translates to 80,000 new jobs. Now, for us, it's important that that's all tied into the resilience, the local supply chain, the low carbon supply chain, and keeping these materials within our shores in order to make that the most sustainable system possible. And the second sector is offshore wind. So there's enormous deployment targets by 2030. The UK hopes to have 40 gigawatts of offshore wind out in its waters, and you can see those are simplified by the mainly yellow colours off the coastline, so off the east coast of England and Scotland. And there's, at the moment, the vast majority of those materials are manufactured and supplied from overseas. But the UK now, we have a target of 60% of those materials and services being supplied by UK companies by 2030, translating into 27,000 new jobs. But that's not going to happen without some kind of intervention and support. And that's going to be where we need to focus a lot of our building up our domestic manufacturing and domestic supply chain capability in the future. And that's something that we'll be supporting. So I think that's it from me. Thanks very much for having me, and happy to take any questions in the panel session at the end.
Thanks very much, Charlotte. That was great. I don't think 10 minutes would ever be enough to capture every bit of support that's available and on offer, but you did a really good job of putting that into one succinct 10-minute presentation, so thank you very much. Right, so this brings us to our final speaker, and I'm just checking we're just running slightly over, but confident we'll pick that up and still have plenty of time for the questions, which are coming in as well. We've got quite a few, so thank you to those who've already submitted questions. So our final speaker today is Vaso Makri. Vaso is the manager of Circular Tayside, which is a partnership between Zero Waste Scotland, Dundee and Angus Chamber of Commerce and Perthshire Chamber of Commerce. Vaso's role is to support SMEs to make the transition towards a circular economy. And today, Vaso will be sharing with you how you can get involved with the project and some examples of circular businesses and some of the support that is available. So Vaso, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Can you hear me? Can you see the screen?
I can, and yes, I can see your screen as well, Vaso.
Lovely. Now, let me try and put it in full screen. Yeah, it worked the first time. That's great. So, hi, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this and for inviting me over. It was really interesting to hear the previous presentations. I'm going to present the Circular Tayside project. I'm not going to present the very in-depth details of what circular economy is, because I think that Charlotte did a really good job of that. And also you can contact me after the event if you want to find out some more details. So let's get started. As Jill mentioned, we are Circular Tayside. It's an ERDF funded project. It is administered by Zero Waste Scotland, but it's delivered by the local chambers of commerce. Our target group is mostly SMEs, so that's why the partnership with the local chambers. We operate across Tayside. However, there is a Circular Edinburgh, a Circular Glasgow, and a Circular Northeast. So I'm very happy to introduce you to them if your business operations take you there. And for now, I would like to share some examples of circular businesses before I go on to show what we do in Circular Tayside. So circularity can be found in pretty much any aspect of a business. You can have a more circular supply chain like these companies over here. These are all existing companies and quite profitable companies. So you can see how circularity can actually work in practice, and maybe you can get some ideas of how you could adopt some of these models and products. You can see we have from fuel to growing mushrooms out of coffee grounds, creating building materials out of hemp. These are all examples of having circularity in the supply chain. Some examples of having circularity in the resource recovery and recycling aspect is Makri. They make roads out of plastic. That is, for me, that is a fantastic example of how a really polluting industry can actually make a big difference. Project Beacon, it's quite local. It's over in Glenfarg, and it deals with it has an advanced plastics and processing facility for plastics that weren't previously recycled and just ended up in well, in not very green ways of disposing of them. Arbiki Vodka, another great local example where vodka is made out of surplus waste potatoes, and then the rest of it is fed to cattle. We have the same example with Ogilvy Vodka, and Arbiki has recently launched its the first climate positive gin in the world, Nadar. So many good examples in this resource recovery and recycling aspect. Another one is product life extension. Here we've got anything from car manufacturers, and so like Makri transmissions, they remanufacture automotive transmissions so that they don't have to buy new ones. You have Edinburgh Makri, where equipment is refurbished. Very local Angus 3D solutions. They do 3D printing, which reduces manufacturing waste from 87% to something like 8%. It is an insane waste reduction. So you can see that these are all ways to reduce waste by extending the life of your products, which I think is really important, especially when you're talking about high-tech products and technologies. If you can make sure that they will last for a long time, you have basically reduced the embedded carbon from your technology by manifold if people don't have to buy new ones and new ones again. Another idea is distributing your products through sharing platforms where things can be used again and again. For example, you have Olio, which is a platform for sharing surplus food. There is Peerbuy, that is a platform for sharing pretty much anything that we have in the house and we're not using. Drills, tables, chairs, anything that we want to rent out for a little bit can be rented out like that. The tool library in Sterling, they just share tools. I mentioned the drill before, so basically the average drill will spend around 17 minutes of its life being used, and the rest of the time it's just going to be stored away somewhere. By using a sharing platform, you can basically increase the use of this tool many times, and different people don't have to have different tools. They can just share the same tools. And another, the last one that I'm going to present as an example is having products, providing products as a service. We have this lighting company called Egg Lighting, where you basically pay per lux of lighting. You can do the same with office furnishings, obviously with bed linen, clothes, pretty much. If you think about it, pretty much any sector can adopt product as a service as a business model, maybe except for food. And so I wanted to share these examples just as a kind of inspiration, but we have many more examples. So I'm very happy to just go over our 30 ideas deck with anyone that is interested about finding more about what circular business examples are out there. So I also wanted to say a couple of words about how CO2 links with circularity. This is from Zero Waste Scotland research paper. Let me just move this so I can read a bit better. So material consumption is responsible for over 2/3 of Scotland's carbon emissions. By adopting a more circular economy in Scotland, we could reduce these territorial emissions by 11 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2050, while providing continued economic growth. Nearly 1 in every 5 tons of material flowing through the Scottish economy is waste. This could become a resource. If you think about this as a resource, then there is so much financial potential in this, in having 1 ton of materials being used without having to import it, and hopefully without having to reprocess it very much. And regardless of carbon accounting methodology, a more circular economy could significantly reduce Scotland's carbon footprint without sacrificing economic prosperity. It's all about thinking smart and efficiently. The linear model is quite simplistic. It's very useful if you want something in a hurry, and it's very simple and it's very efficient in that way, but it is not sophisticated and it is not sustainable in the long term. If we give a bit of thought on how we can make our products more circular, our business models more circular, share them, distribute them as a service, then there are so many possibilities for that 1 ton of materials that is considered waste. So what do we do as Circular Tayside in order to improve what I have already mentioned? So we basically do 2 things. We raise awareness on circular economy, and we help organizations access Zero Waste Scotland support. How do we raise awareness? First of all, we have a series of events throughout the year. We have had events on food waste, biomimicry, education, construction. We have another one on construction tomorrow. Pretty much any subject that is interesting for the local area, we're happy to deliver an event on. If you would like to see an event on anything having to do with circularity, please get in touch. We're always looking for different themes. We have also recorded our events since the beginning of the lockdown, so you can find the recordings of our past events in our website. We also have our Be Inspired page. On our Be Inspired, we put any organization in the local area that has some circular elements goes up there, and we like to promote them through our 9 social media channels and the websites of Circular Tayside and the local chambers of commerce. We try to increase awareness about how easy it is to become a bit more circular. So we're always happy to have more inspiring stories. Those inspiring stories are also added to our Circular Tayside map. This is a map of the local area, and all the entries are about our circular businesses. And also the entries in green are our Circular Tayside ambassadors, which is a group of about 45 ambassadors so far. They are people from local academia, local authorities, local businesses, pretty much anyone that is a strong proponent of circularity is welcome to become one of our ambassadors. And what they do is they have helped us immensely in designing and delivering this project. So we meet quarterly, and we basically brainstorm ideas about how we can make this project more relevant to their sector, to their target group, and they are a fantastic resource. We couldn't have done this without them. So if you do have any circular economy practices, please get in touch. We would love to have you in our group. So these are some ways that we raise awareness with, but the second aspect of what we do is helping organizations access Zero Waste Scotland support. So we start with a one-to-one meeting with myself, and we discuss how your current project is doing or your current product, and then we explore ways to make it more circular through the use of various tools. If after the use of these tools it is still relevant, we will refer you to Zero Waste Scotland sectoral experts. Zero Waste Scotland has many different experts. Charlotte is one of them with the energy infrastructure, but we also have experts on circular manufacturing, food waste, textiles, pretty much anything that you can think of. There is a sectoral expert in Zero Waste Scotland for. Some of the tools that we use as Circular Tayside is the Circular Canvas, which is pretty much like any other business canvas, but has some added fields. We start with mission, and we basically investigate what the mission of the company is, like what the needs that you want to fulfill for your clients are. And then we try to see if those needs can be fulfilled without using any virgin resources and without generating any waste. For example, if the needs of your clients are to have a good sleeping experience, maybe you don't need to manufacture new beds. Maybe you can have a very innovative circular business model that allows for the existing beds in the economy to be recirculated. So we start with mission, and then we have the key activities and the partners, like in a traditional business canvas. But over here we have the use of natural, technical, and energy resources, where we write down which natural, technical, and energy resources are used in order to deliver all your key activities. And that covers admin, operational, marketing, the distribution, everything that you do in the organization. So we basically map out what resources you're using. Over here, we have the value proposition and users and contexts, like in the traditional business canvas. But my favorite bit of the canvas is here. This is quite different. So this is the next use. So here we investigate the end-of-life scenario for your product, even after it leaves your gate, even after it has been used by your clients. We try to think what happens to it. Is it returned back to the economy? Is it returned back to your business? Is it landfilled? Is it incinerated? And what alternatives there are for this? At the end of the canvas, we basically come out with some action points that we can look a bit more into. And we basically most businesses commit to take a stance on those action points, but it can also serve as an information for the next strategic planning of the company. This session usually takes about 1 hour per business, with the exception of really large businesses that have many material flows. We did it with the Botanic Gardens in Dundee, and that took about 5 hours, but that is definitely an exception. And the rest bits are pretty much the same as the traditional business canvas with the revenues, costs. This is quite new, the negative and positive societal, economic and environmental impacts. By filling this in, we basically come up with the language that we can use for potential public and private investors. So this is the canvas, and the other tool that we use is the innovation canvas. This is specifically for innovative businesses or businesses that are considering branching out towards innovation. So in this canvas, it takes us through the whole innovation journey, and it is quite detailed. So we are asked to score from 1 to 5 the aspects of innovation that we have thought about and we have covered. So it can be discovery, transactions, user experiences, IP, financial modeling, investors, marketing. It takes us through the whole innovation journey, and then we score it. And after it is scored, we get a report and some resources on how to improve the bits that don't have enough high enough scoring. It's been a very useful tool, and we deliver this online. So this is what we do at Circular Tayside. If you would like to join us, either as an ambassador or be inspired or on Mep, or if you would like to go over any of the canvases, please let me know. We are happy to work with any organization at any stage of their circular journey, and we are very happy to support them however we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Vaso. I think that we can all agree that concluded the panel session perfectly today. So we appreciate that. And thank you to all of our speakers. We've hopefully given you all a lot to think about. We've got quite a few questions already come in, which is brilliant, but please do submit more or raise your hand. As I previously mentioned, that there are a few options. I've just summarised it there, but just to go into detail, so you can raise your hand and Katie will flag to me if anybody is doing that, and we'll take you off of mute. I can't see any so far. You can submit questions in the chat, sorry, in the question box, or you can submit comments, general comments and feedback and observations in the chat. So I'll invite each of our speakers to put your cameras back on, which is brilliant. I want to mention as well just now, this event is run in partnership with Scottish Enterprise. So although we don't have anyone from Scottish Enterprise on the panel for this first event, they are in the audience. There are quite a few of my previous colleagues from Scottish Enterprise in the attendee list today, and I know that they would be more than happy to take any questions about Scottish Enterprise offline. So please do submit anything that you think would be specific for them, and we can make sure that you get a response to that after the event, if we can't answer it directly ourselves. So in the interest of keeping things smooth, I will direct questions to each of the panelists in turn. So I'll invite you, and then you could take yourself off mute and give your answer to that specific question. So I'll kick it off with the first question, one of my own, and then that'll give me time just to start to organise the ones that have come in. So my question to the panel is, if someone in the audience has an idea for a new technology or to evolve their current offer in the low carbon space, what is the one bit of advice that you would give them to get started and to progress that? So I'm going to pick on my boss, Greig. So I'll pick Greig first. On you go, he's looking at me. So off you go, Greig, give me your answer, and then I'll take each of the rest of the panelists in turn.
Okay, I'll do that very quickly. My advice would be to build your business model. Be very clear about who your customer is, what you're actually delivering to them, or what need you're satisfying, and then how you're going to go about it, and what your route to market is. I think that is really the Mary Poppins moment. The well begun is half done. If you get that right, then the rest will follow.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. And I'll just take the panelists each in the order that they spoke. So Faisal, what is your one bit of advice you would give to someone starting out
Yeah,
in this space?
I definitely agree with what Greg said. In addition to that, my advice would be see if you can try and find someone who's gone through the process that's a little bit ahead of you, or a fair bit ahead of you, preferably. So I found it quite useful meeting other founders that had gone through the process, and they would have quite a lot of experience to share going through the process themselves. Definitely for me, what was helpful was finding an advisor or a mentor at the start. To really help me guide me at the start. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Faisal. And Stuart?
I've got to build on everybody else now. I would say SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So if it's a tech that you're passionate about, if you've got a strength in it, good. If you don't, surround yourself with people who've got strengths in that technology, in that business. That kind of harks to what Faisal's just said. Weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The opportunities, again, so this all resonates with what Greg's already said. So understand your market, understand your customer, understand who your competitors are, and hopefully there may even be enough space in the marketplace for you to coexist with competitors. So a good SWOT analysis would be essential, I think, early on.
That's great. Thanks, Stuart. And Charlotte?
Yeah, so Faisal mentioned the sort of ecosystem of support. Like there is a lot of support out there, but there's not too much, but there is an awful lot, and it can be confusing to navigate. So I think if being at the start of the journey, would really recommend either interface or business gateway to organizations that can help you navigate that ecosystem, because different parts of support are targeted at different parts of the business journey. So some funding, for example, is ring fenced for the commercialization stage, whereas if you're at the start of the journey, you need to know what sort of innovation support is out there. So yeah, just reach out. There's plenty of people and mechanisms out there to guide you along this journey.
That's perfect. Thank you. And finally, Vaso? Vaso, you're on mute. I thought we'd get away with one event without having to say it, but there we go.
No, it will always happen. So is the question about the business support or for the funding?
Either, just mainly from your experience, what advice would you give to a business or an individual who has an idea and is looking to get started?
I would definitely say look at the materials you are using. The technology might be low carbon, but definitely look at the materials and look at alternatives for those materials. Try to have them sourced from as locally as possible. Try to use materials that have already been used. Just work your way down the waste hierarchy. That is one thing that it is more difficult to design a product like that, but it will bring your carbon footprint down many fold down the way. So yeah, that's the first thing.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Vaso. So I'll start picking questions that have been submitted now. Now, forgive me, I might have to get a bit closer to the camera just to read them. So this one is directly for Faisal. So it says, great presentation, Faisal, and congratulations on having a patent pending for SolarisKit. How mobile is SolarisKit once built, i.e. can a person pick it up and carry it from A to B? That's a great question. So over to you, Faisal.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. It's something that we get asked a lot. So yeah, once it's fully assembled, it's very easy to move around. I wouldn't consider myself a very strong person, but even I can do it. The collector itself weighs around 8 kilograms, and it's around 1/2 meter by 1/2 meter in cross section. So it's very comfortable to pick up, and it's not an awkward shape either. The flat packable design, when it's actually packed, it's when it's most mobile. So of course that's before you've assembled it. So when it's not assembled, it's a box that's only several inches deep, which means you can carry it under your arm, or which is the reason why I've sized it the way it is, and it can be transported on a bicycle as well. But when it's fully assembled, yeah, it's still fully portable. Thanks for the question.
That's brilliant, very insightful. So our next question, I think this one will be specifically for Greg. Are there plans to cooperate with partners in continental Europe? I'm thinking particularly with the former Michelin site in Bamberg, Bavaria, which is now being developed into a clean tech park focused on low carbon mobility. So, Greg, have you got any thoughts on that question specifically?
So I think collaboration is definitely at the heart of what we're doing. The market is so big, the opportunities are so wide that really everyone should be trying to work collectively rather than competitively. I mean, I understand that business is all about competition, and I've lived that for 35 years, but really collectively at the moment, at the stage that the economy is in and development is based, I think we'll have to work together. Specifically for the plant, I'm not fully briefed on their plans. However, our board contains Michelin representation, and they know that they can ask us for help or advice or best practice, but ultimately we would be more than delighted to develop collective collaborations with Michelin in Germany or anyone else.
Brilliant, that's great, thanks Greg. So our next question is specifically for Charlotte. There it is, I was on the wrong one. So it says, Charlotte, in a country of mountains and rivers, I was shocked at the lack of development in hydro as an energy source according to your graph. What is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things to say on that. Firstly, it's really expensive to develop a hydro project and very energy and materials intensive. So a lot of the hydro projects in Scotland are fairly old. I know SSE have a huge hydro project planned, Moir Glass hydro, and you know the scale of these in comparison to something like putting up a wind turbine cannot be underestimated. So that's one reason. The second point on that is that I think there are technologies coming to market now that are actually more agile and able to take advantage of our natural geography, perhaps in a, like I said, in a more agile way than traditional hydro, which is, hollowing out a mountainside and building a massive dam. So you may have heard of these companies. There's one called Reenergize. So they are actually developing a hydro system, whereas instead of using water, they use a incredibly dense liquid. So you get a more energy dense transfer, and so you get a greater energy release from pumping this liquid up a hillside rather than water. And another company called Gravitricity, who are reusing old mine shafts. So the idea is that you store the energy as gravitational potential, then release it, and it's a way of storing electrical energy. So those are kind of two things that demonstrate that yes, there is potential in topography, but the traditional way that we've approached hydro is probably prohibitive for most people other than the likes of SSE and Scottish Power. So it's definitely something I see growing in the future.
That's great. And we've certainly had quite a few conversations about hydro at MSIP, given we're surrounded by the Dichty Burn, which I think is overflowing today because of the snow. But we've certainly been thinking that's an opportunity. What can we do with that? So yeah, definitely, as you say, ways to take that in the future. So our next question is, let me just get it up. There we go. So this is one for everyone, I would guess. So I'll go through you in the order that you're on my camera at the top this time. What will the skills and jobs of the future look like in the low carbon space? So this is, I guess it's a personal opinion from each of you. There is no right answer. So I will ask Vaso first, if that's okay. Sorry, Vaso. What do you think the skills and the jobs of the future would look like?
So I can say how they will look like in terms of circular economy, not carbon so far, because that's what I've worked mostly with. We are currently working with some education institutions here in Tayside, and with the help of Fiona Greig, who is the skills and employment expert in Zero Waste Scotland. So there is actively ongoing work on skilling up students in universities and colleges on how their field is going to be more circular in the future. We are also we are not working with primary schools at the moment, to my knowledge, but I know that there is interest in primary schools to talk about waste reduction and how waste is pretty much in every material that we use. From a much more personal opinion and perspective, I think that waste management is going to become a priority in every business, from the service sector to manufacturing to absolutely every sector. So training the generation of today on how to manage this waste is going to be instrumental in saving costs and potentially even fines from businesses in the very near future. I think that a lot of more work has to be done there, and really, really fast. But things are moving, so I'm happy to at least see that.
That's great. And Greg?
So I think two things. First, there's a big opportunity to make skills and the access to training far more equitable and inclusive, and that's driven both by companies who want to operate in this space in that manner, but also through legislation and funding, which demands that employment is both equitable and inclusive. And also the second thing would be new skills which have to be developed for new technologies. So things like constructing and maintaining wind turbines. How do you take a battery to bits and put it back together again? How do you repurpose batteries at the end of their life? All of these things will be slightly different to the traditional, you know, how do I use a spanner or a drill or whatever it might be in an efficient manner.
That's great. Thanks, Greg. Right, in the interest of time, because we've got a lot of questions, so I'll skip asking everyone else that one specifically. I have had a comment from Helen Kemp from regarding the Carruthers wheel. Helen, I was thinking of you when we talked about hydro there, and Helen just wants to note that the Carruthers wheel rewrites the hydropower rules and is much cheaper than traditional hydro. So there is an opportunity there if anybody is interested in finding out more. We've had a question, this one interests me a lot because this takes up a lot of my conversations currently. What plans, if any, does MSIP, Zero Waste Scotland and Circular Tayside, as well as the two companies, have for engaging at COP26? I think that we're almost out of time, and I think that's quite a good question to start to wrap up on today. So I'll go to Charlotte first, and then I'll give you each an opportunity, because I think COP26 is a pretty big deal for all of us in the space that we work in. So Charlotte, first of all.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. I don't think we've gone public with our plans yet, but basically if we're looking to collaborate, if you have any great ideas, if you have any tech you want us to showcase, get in touch and we'll build it into our plans.
Brilliant, good answer, short and sweet as well. Faisal, do you want to say a few thoughts?
Yeah, obviously COP26 is something that we'd love to be part of. We're not exactly sure how to do that at the moment. We've been told that the Solar Impulse Foundation will have presence at COP26, and we are one of the 1,000 solutions to change the world. So we're hoping to have an opportunity to either display the tech or be able to pitch the idea. If there is an opportunity like that, we'd obviously jump at it. We haven't formalized any plans there yet, so we'll be in touch, Charlotte.
And Stuart?
Yeah, well, I know that there's certainly thoughts around the Michelin Scotland Innovation Parc for getting involved. At product level, we'd love to demonstrate some of our products. I'm thinking of you getting over your nerves, Jill. We could have the electric motorcycle available for people to see, possibly even ride-ons, but I'm not sure about the health and safety implications of that one, but it would certainly be there for people to see, and they can understand the potential for these things to reduce carbon footprints and support low carbon economies.
That's brilliant. How exciting would that be? And we'll just need to get past the health and safety aspects, Stuart.
Yeah.
And Vaso, a short answer on that one?
At the moment, we also don't have any firm plans on the COP26. We have been talking about potentially having a stop. However, it is a bit early to give a definitive answer on that. There is work being done there, though.
Excellent. As you can see, I'm being beamed by sunshine in the lovely Angus snow/sunny weather right now. So over to you, Greg, for final answer around COP26.
So two streams to our thinking. The first is to be present at the Green Zone in Glasgow, both through digital and printed media, but also to be physically there to network and exchange. But we see a huge opportunity to be actually part of an extended Green Zone. In the pipeline of tenants that we have on site, it looks like we will have two big warehouses of about 10,000 square metres each available at that time. And assuming that a physical COP26 goes ahead, we would like to hold a showcase event on site. We're in the final stages of putting that together as a proposal, an answer to the government call, which concludes on the 5th of March. So I hope within the next 4 weeks we would have a firm answer to that question.
Thanks, Greg. That was an exclusive right there for our audience today, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
We've been careful not to speak too much about that yet. So yeah, thank you all so much. I think that brings us to the end of our panelist Q&A session today. If Katie wants to flick just to the next slide, there we go, perfect. There's just a couple of final things to share with our audience. Our next low carbon event, I did mention this is the first in a series. The next one's focused on batteries, so I think Stuart set the scene with that one fairly well, and we've got a lot to live up to now. And we don't have a date confirmed yet, but it will likely be early March, and we will share that on our social media, so the MSIP social media soon, so do follow us. We also have another event that MSIP is involved in. It's the EU in transition to zero emission mobility. So similar topics to what we touched upon today, and that will be on the 22nd of February, and that event will go live today. So again, it will be shared on our social media. And finally, a bit of a plug, Faisal did mention it, that he is a participant of cohort 1 of MSIP's Accelerator programme. We are recruiting for the second cohort of that. The closing date is the 22nd of February, and there is an awareness session on the 16th of February, which I think Katie might have just shared the link if you're interested in attending that in the chat space for this event. And all of our upcoming events and activity, including COP26, once we're ready, will be shared on our social media. Please do follow us there. And final thoughts. So thank you to our panel. I think that I was a bit worried when I thought we have 5, how will we get through it? But I think you were all so clear and very succinct with your presentations. And I know I personally got a lot out of it, and hopefully our audience did too. The session has been recorded, so we will share that link on our social media. And please do send that to anyone that you think might want to watch this back. And finally, if you do have any follow-up questions or comments, either for MSIP, for any of our panelists, or for Scottish Enterprise, please do get in touch at info@msipdundee.com, and we will pick up your inquiry and share that with the relevant individual to make sure you get a response. So thanks very much, everyone. Not bad, only 4 minutes over. I think that's not bad when we've managed to share so much this morning. So other than that, enjoy the snow/sunshine, and no sledging injuries, please, today. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.